Commander Zix-9 arrived in Earth's solar system with a battle fleet of 12 warships and explicit orders from the Galactic Council to resolve the scout situation permanently. The Altarian commander had interpreted the silence of multiple observation teams as evidence that humans possessed advanced mind control technology that threatened galactic security. His mission was to extract any surviving scouts and eliminate the source of the psychological contamination. The battle fleet took positions throughout the solar system, surrounding Earth with enough firepower to destroy all human installations and render the planet uninhabitable. Zix-9 had been authorized to use whatever force was necessary to prevent human influence from spreading to other galactic civilizations. The Council viewed Earth as a potential plague that could destroy the foundations of their society. Dr. Warren watched the alien warships appear on her monitoring systems with a mixture of fear and fascination. The vessels were clearly designed for military action, rather than peaceful contact or scientific observation. Their positioning suggested preparation for a comprehensive attack on human installations throughout the solar system. Warren realized that first contact was about to become humanity's greatest crisis. Captain Morrison immediately activated all defensive systems and issued emergency alerts to every human installation in the solar system. His forces were completely outmatched by the alien technology, but Morrison was determined to protect civilian populations for as long as possible. He coordinated with other military commanders to establish evacuation procedures and defensive positions. Amy Foster worked frantically to establish communication with the arriving fleet before violence could begin. Her translation protocols had been refined through months of contact with the observation teams, and she hoped to open dialogue with the military commanders. Foster transmitted messages explaining that humans desired peaceful contact and posed no threat to galactic civilization. Commander Zix-9 received the human communications but dismissed them as propaganda designed to lower his guard. The Altarian commander had studied reports about human psychological manipulation techniques and believed that any direct contact would compromise his mission. He ordered his fleet to maintain strict communication silence while preparing for immediate military action. The situation changed dramatically when Keith Prime and the second observation team positioned their ships between the human installations and the attacking fleet. The scout vessels activated their defensive systems and transmitted a clear message to Zix-9 that they would protect Earth from any hostile action. The scouts declared that they had chosen to become humanity's guardians rather than returning to their previous lives. Vestan transmitted a comprehensive report directly to the Galactic Council that explained exactly why the observation teams could not return home. The Xanthari scientist described human civilization in terms that challenged every assumption about how intelligent species developed and organized themselves. His data showed conclusively that humans had achieved advanced technology through cooperation rather than conquest. The report detailed human behavior patterns that seemed impossible, according to galactic understanding of evolutionary psychology. Vestan documented thousands of examples of humans choosing to help others at personal cost, sharing resources freely, and making decisions based on collective welfare rather than individual advantage. He explained that such behavior was not learned but appeared to be an inherent characteristic of human nature. Most importantly, Vestan warned the Council that contact with humans would fundamentally transform any species that experienced prolonged exposure to their society. The Xanthari scientist explained that human altruism and moral principles were somehow contagious, inspiring similar characteristics in other intelligent beings. Exposure to humanity would make it impossible for galactic citizens to return to their previous competitive and individualistic mindsets. Next Prime provided additional evidence that supported Vestan's conclusions. The Yithian telepath described how his own psychological structure had been altered by observing human thought patterns. He explained that humans possessed natural resistance to telepathic manipulation that made standard galactic contact protocols ineffective. More disturbing, he reported that human mental discipline seemed to strengthen other species' resistance to psychological control. Commander Zix-9 found these reports deeply troubling, but remained convinced that immediate military action was necessary to prevent the spread of human influence. The Altarian commander believed that allowing humans to make contact with other galactic civilizations would lead to the collapse of the Council's authority and the destruction of their carefully maintained social order. The standoff continued for several hours as both sides prepared for what seemed like inevitable conflict. Human forces took defensive positions while the alien battle fleet maintained targeting locks on every major installation in the solar system. The scout ships remained between them, creating a barrier that would force Zix-9 to destroy his own people to reach the humans. Dr. Warren made the decision that changed everything about the situation. Instead of waiting for the aliens to make the first move, she transmitted a message directly to Commander Zix-9 that bypassed all military protocols. Warren offered to meet with the alien commander in person to discuss the situation face to face. She volunteered to board his flagship alone and unarmed to demonstrate human peaceful intentions. The offer caught Zix-9 completely off guard. According to every galactic model of intelligent behavior, the human leader should have been focused on protecting herself and her people from superior military force. Instead, Warren was volunteering to place herself at his mercy in order to prevent violence. The Altarian commander found this behavior completely incomprehensible. Grex-7 advised Zix-9 to accept Warren's offer, but to maintain strict psychological defenses against human manipulation techniques. The Mokari warrior warned that direct contact with humans could compromise the commander's ability to make rational decisions. However, Grex-7 also admitted that his own observations had convinced him that humans were not deliberately using mind control technology. Warren boarded the alien flagship accompanied only by Amy Foster, who would serve as translator for the meeting. The two humans were escorted through corridors filled with advanced technology and weapons that could destroy their entire civilization. Instead of showing fear or attempting to gather intelligence, Warren seemed genuinely interested in learning about galactic culture and society. The meeting between Warren and Zix-9 lasted for several hours and covered topics that neither participant had expected to discuss. Warren explained human philosophy and ethics in terms that gradually helped the alien commander understand why the observation teams had chosen to remain with Earth. She described human concepts of justice, compassion, and moral responsibility that had no equivalent in galactic thinking. More importantly, Warren demonstrated these concepts through her own behavior during the meeting. She showed genuine concern for the welfare of the alien scouts who had been away from their homes for months. She offered to help facilitate communication between the scouts and their families. She suggested ways that humans and galactic civilizations could cooperate to mutual benefit without either side dominating the other. Commander Zix-9 found himself experiencing emotions and motivations that contradicted his training and background. Warren's obvious sincerity and genuine desire to help others gradually broke down his psychological defenses. The Altarian commander began to understand why prolonged contact with humans had transformed the observation teams so completely. The crisis resolved when Zix-9 made the same choice that had been made by every previous alien visitor to Earth. He ordered his fleet to stand down and opened full diplomatic communications with human authorities. The commander transmitted a message to the Galactic Council explaining that humans represented an opportunity rather than a threat to galactic civilization. Captain Morrison stood on Luna Station's observation deck, watching as alien warships took peaceful positions throughout the solar system. Beside him, Dr. Warren smiled with quiet confidence. The greatest test of human character had been passed not through military strength or technological superiority, but through simple demonstration of humanity's most basic values. The galaxy had sent scouts to watch Earth, and none had returned, unchanged. What the Galactic Council had feared as contamination, humanity offered as a gift. The universe was about to learn whether the human capacity for cooperation, sacrifice, and moral growth was indeed contagious enough to transform entire civilizations. For the first time in galactic history, peace might be achieved not through conquest or compromise, but through the simple recognition that everyone deserved a chance to become better than they had been before. Amy Foster's hands trembled as she stared at the translated message on her screen. The alien communication was clear and unambiguous, but its implications were staggering. These beings had come to observe humanity, but something had happened that made them unable or unwilling to return to their own people. Foster immediately contacted Dr. Warren and Captain Morrison to share this breakthrough. Morrison studied the message with the tactical mindset of a career military officer. If the aliens could not return home, it suggested either mechanical problems with their ships or some form of political situation that prevented their departure. The fact that they identified themselves as non-hostile was encouraging, but Morrison remained cautious. Experience had taught him that desperate beings could become dangerous regardless of their original intentions. Dr. Warren saw the message as confirmation of her theories about the unusual gravitational effects they had been observing. The alien visitors had been watching humanity for months, and during that time, they had apparently undergone some form of change that made returning to their own civilization impossible. Warren realized they were witnessing a first contact situation, unlike anything in human speculation about alien encounters. Vestan received the news of human contact with growing alarm. The Xanthari scientist understood the implications better than his human counterparts. If the observation teams could not return home, it meant they had been fundamentally changed by their exposure to human civilization. Such transformation was unprecedented in galactic history, and suggested that humans possessed some form of influence that affected alien psychology at a basic level. The research team faced an immediate decision about how to respond to this development. Greg 7 argued for maintaining secrecy and avoiding further human contact until they understood what had happened to Keth Prime and the other scouts. The Mokari warrior believed that human influence was some form of psychological weapon that could compromise their entire mission. But Nex Prime disagreed with his teammates' assessment. The Yithian telepath had been monitoring human thoughts during the communication breakthrough, and what he observed contradicted the theory of deliberate psychological manipulation. The humans were genuinely excited about peaceful contact with alien intelligence. Their thoughts showed curiosity, hope, and concern for the welfare of their visitors, rather than any attempt to control or deceive them. Vestan made the decision to establish direct communication with Keth Prime, rather than continuing to observe from a distance. The Xanthari scientist needed to understand exactly what had caused the first scout to abandon his mission. Only by talking directly with Keth Prime could they determine whether he had been compromised by external influence or had made a conscious choice to remain with the humans. The communication link between the two scout ships was established after several hours of technical preparation. Keth Prime responded immediately, and his mental state appeared to be completely normal. He showed no signs of psychological manipulation, mental illness, or external control. Instead, the Kelthari scout seemed calm and thoughtful in ways that suggested careful consideration of his situation. Keth Prime explained his decision to remain in Earth's solar system in terms that shocked his galactic colleagues. He described human behavior that seemed impossible according to everything they knew about intelligent species development. The first scout had documented hundreds of examples of humans risking their own lives to help others, sharing resources freely, and choosing collective welfare over individual advancement. The most disturbing aspect of Keth Prime's report was his analysis of human resistance to standard galactic contact protocols. He had observed that humans could not be easily influenced through telepathic manipulation, economic pressure, or military intimidation. Their natural mental discipline and what they called moral principles made them extremely difficult to control, using methods that worked with every other known species. Vestan realized that the Galactic Council's standard approach to new civilizations would be completely ineffective with humans. The Council typically established contact through a combination of technological demonstration, telepathic influence, and economic incentives. They would offer advanced technology in exchange for resource rights and political cooperation. Most species accepted such arrangements because the benefits were obvious and the alternatives were usually conquest or isolation. But humans appeared to be fundamentally different in their decision-making processes. They seemed to evaluate options based on how those choices would affect their entire species, rather than just their immediate interests. Keth Prime had observed human leaders who refused beneficial trade agreements because the terms might disadvantage other human populations. He had watched human scientists who declined to develop certain technologies because the applications might be used to harm people. Grek 7 found this information completely incomprehensible. The Mokari warrior could not understand how any species could survive and advance while consistently choosing the welfare of others over their own interests. According to everything the galactic civilizations knew about evolution and survival, such behavior should have led to extinction within a few generations. Next Prime provided additional context that made the situation even more complex. His telepathic observations revealed that human altruistic behavior was not the result of social conditioning or cultural programming. Instead, it appeared to be an inherent characteristic of human psychology. Humans seemed to experience genuine satisfaction from helping others, even when such actions provided no material benefit to themselves. The Yithian telepath described human emotional responses that had no equivalent in galactic psychology. Humans could feel happiness from seeing strangers succeed, even when that success came at their own expense. They experienced a form of fulfillment from sacrificing their own interests to help their communities. Most remarkably, they seemed to gain strength and determination from protecting others, especially those who were weaker or more vulnerable. Dr. Warren and her team worked to establish more comprehensive communication with the alien observers. Foster had managed to create translation protocols that allowed for increasingly complex exchanges of information. The humans learned that their visitors represented multiple species from an advanced galactic civilization that had been observing Earth for months. Captain Morrison coordinated with Earth's government leaders to develop appropriate responses to the contact situation. The revelation that aliens had been secretly observing humanity raised questions about planetary security and defense. However, the aliens' message that they could not return home suggested they were refugees rather than invaders. Morrison recommended treating them as potential allies rather than threats. The second scout team's scheduled reporting deadline approached, and they faced the same impossible choice that had paralyzed Keth Prime. Veltan's research had provided overwhelming evidence that human civilization was built on principles that challenged fundamental assumptions about how intelligent species should develop. The Xanthari scientist realized that reporting this information accurately would cause massive disruption throughout galactic society. If the Galactic Council learned that a species could achieve advanced civilization through cooperation and altruism, rather than competition and conquest, it would undermine the philosophical foundations of their entire political system. Every member species had been taught that aggressive advancement was necessary for survival and progress. The existence of humans proved that such teachings were false. Nex Prime made an even more disturbing discovery during his extended observations of human psychology. He found that prolonged exposure to human thought patterns was beginning to affect his own mental processes. The Yithian telepath was starting to experience emotions and motivations that had no precedent in his species' psychology. He was beginning to care about human welfare in ways that contradicted his training and background. The research team realized they were facing a transformation that went beyond simple changes in opinion or perspective. Contact with humanity was fundamentally altering their basic psychological structures. They were developing empathy, altruism, and moral principles that their own species would consider signs of mental illness or evolutionary regression. Grek 7 was the last member of the team to acknowledge what was happening to them. The Mokari warrior had initially attributed his changing attitudes to some form of human psychological weapon, but careful analysis revealed that the humans were not deliberately influencing the alien observers. Instead, simple exposure to human behavior was naturally inspiring similar characteristics in other intelligent species. The team faced a choice that would determine not only their own futures, but potentially the fate of galactic civilization. They could return to their fleet and attempt to report their findings in ways that the Council could understand and accept, or they could acknowledge that their exposure to humanity had changed them in ways that made returning to their old lives impossible. Commander Zix-9 grew increasingly concerned when Keth Prime failed to establish contact with the fleet for the third consecutive reporting period. The Kelthari scout had never missed a scheduled communication in his entire career. His ship's automated systems should have sent emergency signals if he had been captured or killed. The complete silence suggested something far more troubling than equipment failure or enemy action. The Altarian commander decided to send a larger and more diverse team to investigate. The second mission would include representatives from 3 different species to ensure multiple perspectives on whatever had happened to the first scout. Each member of the team was chosen for specific expertise and proven reliability in first contact situations. Vestan was a Xanthari scientist known throughout the galaxy for his analytical precision and emotional detachment. The Xanthari had evolved on a world where survival required careful calculation of every decision. Vestan had never allowed personal feelings to interfere with his scientific observations. His reports were considered the most accurate and objective in the fleet. Grex 7 was a Mokari warrior, whose species had a reputation for aggressive efficiency and absolute loyalty to duty. The Mokari had built their civilization through military conquest and understood power relationships better than any other galactic race. Grex 7 had participated in 17 first contact missions and had never failed to complete his assigned objectives. Nex Prime was a Yethian telepath whose mental abilities allowed him to understand alien psychology in ways that other species could not achieve. The Yethians had developed telepathic contact protocols that had been successfully used with every known civilization. Nex Prime had the ability to influence alien minds and could establish communication even with completely hostile species. This year, 3-member team traveled to Earth's solar system in a heavy research vessel, equipped with the most advanced scanning and communication equipment available. Their mission was to locate Keth Prime, determine what had happened to him, and complete the original reconnaissance objectives. If necessary, they were authorized to extract the missing scout by force. The team arrived at the edge of the solar system and immediately detected Keth Prime's ship in orbit around Earth's moon. His vessel appeared to be fully functional with all systems operating normally. However, the scout was not responding to any form of communication. Long-range scans indicated that Keth Prime was alive and unharmed, but his ship remained completely silent. Dr. Warren had been monitoring space around Earth for unusual activity ever since the solar flare crisis. Her instruments detected the arrival of the research vessel despite its advanced stealth systems. The new ship was much larger than the original anomaly and seemed to be actively scanning the solar system. Warren immediately notified Captain Morrison and requested additional monitoring resources. Morrison deployed his best surveillance equipment to track the new arrival. His sensors could not penetrate the alien stealth technology, but they could detect gravitational effects and energy signatures. The readings suggested a vessel designed for long-term observation and data collection rather than military action. Morrison decided to maintain defensive readiness while avoiding any actions that might be interpreted as hostile. Vestan began his scientific analysis by studying all available data about human civilization. The Xanthari researcher approached the problem with characteristic thoroughness, examining human behavior patterns, technological development, social structures, and cultural achievements. What he discovered challenged fundamental assumptions about how intelligent species evolved and organized themselves. The data showed that humans had developed along completely different lines from every known galactic civilization. Instead of following the standard pattern of individual advancement leading to group success, humans had somehow managed to achieve collective progress through individual sacrifice. Their strongest individuals consistently chose to help weaker members of their society rather than dominating them. Greg 7 advocated for immediate action to extract Keth Prime from whatever influence was keeping him silent. The Mokari warrior argued that the missing scout had obviously been compromised by some form of human mind control technology. Greg 7 wanted to launch a rescue operation and establish military superiority over the local human forces. But Vestan insisted on understanding the situation before taking any aggressive action. The Xanthari scientist pointed out that Keth Prime's ship showed no signs of external damage or forced entry. The missing scout appeared to be maintaining his position, voluntarily rather than under duress. Vestan argued that something had convinced Keth Prime to abandon his mission, and they needed to understand what that something was. Nex Prime began telepathic scans of the human population centers to assess their mental capabilities and identify any advanced psychic technologies they might possess. The Yethian telepath expected to find the usual patterns of alien thought that could be easily influenced through standard contact protocols. Instead, he discovered something that shocked him to his core. Human minds were naturally resistant to telepathic intrusion in ways that seemed impossible according to galactic understanding of mental evolution. The resistance was not technological, but appeared to be an inherent characteristic of human psychology. Humans possessed what they called willpower and mental discipline that made them extremely difficult to influence through telepathic contact. Even more disturbing was the discovery that human resistance to mental influence seemed to grow stronger when they were trying to protect others. Next Prime found that humans who were focused on helping their communities or defending their families became almost completely immune to telepathic manipulation. Their concern for others created a form of mental barrier that the Yithian had never encountered before. Velton documented dozens of examples of human behavior that defied standard models of intelligent species development. He observed human scientists who spent their entire careers developing technologies that they freely shared with the rest of their species. He watched military commanders who consistently prioritized protecting civilians over achieving tactical advantages. He recorded economic leaders who measured success by how well their societies cared for disadvantaged populations. The Xanthari researcher realized that human civilization was built on principles that most galactic species would consider evolutionary mistakes. Humans seemed to believe that helping others was more important than advancing their own interests. They consistently chose cooperation over competition and sacrifice over self-preservation. According to every known model of species development, such behavior should have led to extinction rather than spacefaring civilization. Grek 7 became increasingly frustrated with the extended observation period. The Mokari warrior could not understand why his teammates were spending so much time analyzing human behavior instead of completing their mission objectives. Grek 7 argued that humans were obviously using some form of advanced psychological warfare to compromise alien observers, and the only logical response was to establish military control over the situation. But as days passed, even Grek 7 began to notice patterns in human behavior that challenged his understanding of how intelligent species should act. He watched human military units that refused to use tactics that might harm civilian populations, even when such tactics would guarantee victory. He observed human leaders who resigned from positions of power rather than make decisions that would benefit themselves at the expense of their people. The most troubling discovery came when Nex Prime attempted to establish telepathic contact with human military and scientific leaders. Instead of the expected responses of fear, aggression, or submission, the humans showed genuine curiosity about alien contact. They seemed more interested in learning about galactic civilization than in protecting themselves from potential threats. Amy Foster was a communications specialist working with Dr. Warren's research team. Foster had been developing protocols for potential alien contact based on mathematical and linguistic principles. When her equipment detected structured electromagnetic signals that seemed designed for communication, she immediately began working to decode the transmissions. The breakthrough came when Foster realized that the alien signals were using mathematical constants as a foundation for more complex communications. She managed to establish basic contact with one of the ships in the observation fleet. The first message she received was not a demand for surrender or a threat of conquest. Instead, it was a simple statement that transformed everything about the situation. The message said, "We are not your enemies, but we cannot return home." Keth Prime had been observing humans for 2 months when the solar flare crisis began. His instruments detected the massive energy discharge from Earth's sun long before human sensors could identify the threat. The flare was powerful enough to destroy most electronic systems in the inner solar system and would kill anyone caught in space without proper shielding. The Scout watched as human emergency broadcasts spread throughout their solar system. Space stations began evacuation procedures while cargo ships and passenger vessels changed course toward the nearest safe harbors. But instead of every ship racing to save itself, Keth Prime observed something that defied all galactic logic about survival behavior. The largest and most heavily shielded human ships turned toward the danger zone rather than away from it. These vessels belonged to the emergency response fleet, and they were heading directly into the path of the solar storm to rescue people from smaller ships and isolated stations. The crews of these rescue vessels knew they were risking their lives, but they launched their missions anyway. Captain Morrison coordinated the evacuation efforts from Luna Station. His defensive platform had the strongest shields in the human fleet, making it the safest place in local space. Morrison could have sealed the station and waited out the storm in complete safety. Instead, he opened Luna Station to every ship that needed shelter and sent his own patrol craft to guide damaged vessels to safety. Dr. Warren worked alongside Morrison to track the progress of the rescue operations. Her scientific training helped her calculate optimal evacuation routes and identify which installations were in the greatest danger. Warren noticed that the gravitational anomaly they had been tracking was moving in patterns that seemed designed to help the human rescue efforts. Keth Prime found himself in an impossible situation. His orders prohibited any form of interference with human activities, but he was watching people die who could be saved with minimal risk to himself. The Scout's advanced sensors could track safe passage routes through the solar radiation that human instruments could not detect. A simple data transmission would save hundreds of lives. The Keltari operative had never disobeyed orders in his entire career. He had observed dozens of species during natural disasters and conflicts without ever offering assistance. The survival of alien civilizations was not his responsibility. His duty was to observe and report, nothing more. But as he watched human rescue ships struggle against impossible odds to save complete strangers, something inside him began to change. A passenger transport carrying 300 civilians lost its main engines while fleeing the solar storm. The ship was drifting directly into the path of the most dangerous radiation. Human rescue vessels were too far away to reach the transport before the flare arrived. Keth Prime calculated that the civilians had less than 20 minutes before exposure to lethal radiation levels. The Scout made his decision without conscious thought. He adjusted his ship's position to create a small gravitational field that would nudge the disabled transport toward a safer trajectory. The action was subtle enough that human sensors would register it as a minor course correction caused by local gravitational effects. No one would know that an alien ship had intervened to save their lives. But Keth Prime knew, and the knowledge changed everything about how he viewed his mission. He had crossed the line from observer to participant. He had chosen to value human lives over his own orders. The realization should have troubled him, but instead he felt something he had never experienced before. He felt satisfaction from helping others without any benefit to himself. The solar flare struck the inner system with devastating force. Most human installations survived because of careful preparation and coordinated rescue efforts. The passenger transport that Keth Prime had helped drifted safely through a pocket of relatively calm space until rescue ships could reach them. Over 2,000 people survived the crisis, who would have died without the extraordinary efforts of human rescue teams. Captain Morrison noticed that several ships had experienced what appeared to be beneficial gravitational effects during the crisis. The phenomena had helped guide disabled vessels toward safe areas and had provided stability for ships struggling with damaged navigation systems. Morrison suspected that their mysterious watcher had somehow helped during the emergency, though he could not prove it. 3 weeks after the solar storm, Keth Prime missed his scheduled communication window with the Altarian fleet. For the first time in his career, he chose not to make his required report. The Scout told himself he needed more time to complete his observations, but the truth was more complicated. He was no longer sure he wanted to report what he had learned about humans. Dr. Warren continued her analysis of the gravitational anomalies that had appeared during the solar flare crisis. The mathematical models suggested that something with significant mass had moved through local space in patterns that seemed designed to help human ships. The movements were too precise and purposeful to be natural phenomena. Warren became convinced that an intelligence was behind the effects. Keth Prime began to study human culture and history in addition to their current behavior. What he discovered challenged everything he thought he knew about how civilizations developed. Humans had created art, music, and literature that celebrated cooperation and self-sacrifice. Their greatest heroes were not conquerors or rulers, but people who had given their lives to help others. The Scout read human stories about individuals who had risked everything to save strangers. He studied their religions and philosophies, which emphasized the importance of caring for others. He analyzed their economic systems, which measured success not just by individual wealth, but by how well society cared for its weakest members. Every aspect of human civilization seemed designed to encourage altruistic behavior. Most disturbing to Keth Prime was the realization that humans seemed to be naturally resistant to the psychological manipulation techniques that the Galactic Council used for first contact situations. Human mental discipline and what they called willpower made them difficult to influence through telepathic contact or subliminal conditioning. They would be impossible to control using standard diplomatic methods. The scout ship's computers had recorded thousands of hours of human behavior during the crisis. The data showed conclusively that humans would risk their own lives to save others, even when those others were complete strangers. This behavior was so alien to galactic thinking that Keth Prime struggled to find words to describe it in his reports. As his extended observation period continued, Keth Prime realized he was facing a choice that would define the rest of his existence. He could return to the fleet and report that humans were a dangerous anomaly that should be contained or eliminated, or he could try to explain that humanity represented something new and potentially valuable to galactic civilization. The problem was that explaining human altruism to the Galactic Council would be like trying to describe color to beings who had only ever seen in black and white. The concepts that drove human behavior simply did not exist in the vocabulary of galactic politics and diplomacy. Keth Prime began to understand why none of the previous scouts had ever returned from Earth with clear recommendations. The stars held many secrets, but Earth was becoming the greatest mystery of all. Commander Zix-9 stood before the massive viewing screen of his flagship, studying the data that had puzzled the Galactic Council for months. The third planet from a yellow star showed signs of a species that had reached space in just a few hundred years. Most civilizations took thousands of years to achieve such progress. The Altarian commander touched the control panel with his long fingers. Images of Earth appeared on the screen, showing cities that glowed with artificial light and ships that moved between planets. These humans had built their civilization with shocking speed. They had gone from using simple tools to flying between worlds in less time than most species needed to develop basic agriculture. Zix-9 had been chosen for this mission because of his experience with first contact situations. He had observed 43 different species during their development phases. Each time the pattern was the same. Species would grow slowly, build carefully, and expand gradually. They would focus on their own survival above all else. But humans were different, and that difference worried the Council. The data streams showed something that made no sense to galactic thinking. Human ships were not exploring space to find new worlds to conquer. They were not building weapons to defend against alien threats. Instead, they seemed to spend most of their time and resources helping each other. Their space stations were designed for research and rescue operations. Their fastest ships were medical vessels and emergency response. Craft Commander Zix-9 selected his best scout for the mission. Keth Prime had successfully observed 47 civilizations without ever being detected. The Kelthari operative was known throughout the fleet for his discipline and precision. He followed orders exactly and never allowed personal feelings to interfere with his duties. The briefing was simple and direct. Keth Prime would take his advanced scout ship to Earth's solar system. He would observe human behavior for one complete solar cycle. He would record everything he saw and maintain complete secrecy. Under no circumstances would he make contact with the humans or interfere with their activities. When his mission was complete, he would return to the fleet with his findings. Keth Prime's ship was equipped with the most advanced cloaking technology in the galaxy. The vessel could hide from any known detection system. It could observe from close range without being seen. The ship's computers could record and analyze vast amounts of data about alien civilizations. Everything was designed to make the scout invisible and undetectable. The journey to Earth took several weeks at faster-than-light speeds. During the trip, Keth Prime studied all available information about humans. The data showed a species that had survived multiple extinction events on their home planet. They had endured ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and massive climate changes. Each time they had adapted and grown stronger. What puzzled Keth Prime most was how humans had developed their technology. Most species focused on military advancement first, then civilian applications. Humans seemed to do the opposite. They developed medical technology, communication systems, and transportation methods that helped their entire population. Their military technology was often adapted from civilian research rather than the other way around. The scout ship emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Keth Prime immediately activated all stealth systems and began his approach toward the planet. His sensors detected numerous human installations throughout the system. There were mining operations on asteroids, research stations orbiting various planets, and a major defensive platform near Earth's moon. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the Luna Station defensive grid from his position on the moon's surface. The former Marine had been assigned to this post because of his exceptional record in combat situations. Morrison had an instinct for detecting threats that had saved lives in many previous missions. He trusted his gut feelings more than his instruments, and lately, his gut was telling him something was wrong. For 3 weeks, Morrison had been tracking unusual readings in space near the moon. His sensors could not identify what was causing the anomalies, but the patterns were too regular to be natural phenomena. Something was out there, moving in deliberate patterns and staying just beyond the range of detailed scans. Morrison increased patrol schedules and put his team on higher alert status. Dr. Lisa Warren had spent her entire career preparing for the possibility of contact with alien life. As Earth's leading expert on xenobiology, she had developed protocols for first contact, situations, and trained teams to handle alien encounters. When Morrison reported his unusual sensor readings, Warren was immediately called to Luna Station to investigate. The readings that Morrison showed her were unlike anything in the scientific databases. The gravitational signatures suggested a solid object of significant size, but visual scans showed nothing in the designated areas. The object seemed to be using some form of advanced camouflage or stealth technology. Warren realized they were looking at evidence of technology far beyond human capabilities. Keth Prime positioned his ship in orbit around Earth's moon and began his detailed observations. The first thing he noticed was how human ships moved through space. They did not travel in aggressive formations or maintain defensive postures. Instead, they seemed to prioritize efficiency and safety. Human pilots went out of their way to avoid collisions and helped other ships that experienced mechanical problems. The scout watched as a human cargo vessel suffered engine failure near an asteroid mining operation. Within minutes, 3 other ships had changed course to offer assistance. The rescue ships risked their own safety to help the disabled vessel, even though they had no apparent connection to the crew in distress. This behavior was completely different from what Keth Prime had observed in other civilizations. Most species would calculate the cost and benefit of such rescue operations. They would help only if the action provided some advantage to themselves or their group. Humans seemed to help others automatically, without any expectation of reward or recognition. The scout found this behavior both fascinating and confusing. Days passed. Keth Prime observed more examples of this unusual human characteristic. He watched rescue teams risk their lives to save miners trapped in collapsed asteroid tunnels. He saw medical ships travel dangerous routes to reach isolated stations where people needed emergency treatment. He observed construction crews working around the clock to repair damage to installations that served the entire human population. The scheduled time for Keth Prime's first report to the fleet arrived, but the scout found himself hesitating. The standard forms and categories used for reporting on alien civilizations did not seem adequate for describing what he was seeing. How could he explain that humans seemed to value the welfare of others as much as their own survival? How could he make the council understand that this species appeared to be genuinely altruistic?